Hello everyone, my name is David Kiernan and I work in the curriculum team at NCFE. And this webinar is to help prepare you for the Level 1/2 Cert external assessment. So that covers health and fitness, engineering, business and enterprise, art and design, and performance skills. So our plan for this webinar is to first of all show you what qualhub, one of the key areas to find all the resources you'll need. We're going to have a look at the regulations that need to be followed when administering the external assessment, where to access assessment papers, how the marks are broken down and the grading of the exams, the type and style of question in the exam paper, some useful teaching strategies to help you deliver this to your learners, some of the resources that we have available to you, and finally, how to address any questions you may have. So let us begin with qualhub. This is the primary go-to for resources, the specification, assessments, regulations, and so much more. And there are 4 tabs, as you can see at the top there: qualifications, gain approval, delivery and learner support, and policies and documents. Now for qualifications, your own subject page, you can click on qualifications, or the easiest thing, just search for the name of your qualification in there, or just level 1/2, and you will see a list of those suggested qualifications. That will direct you to your subject area page. For example, this one here is for art and design. And on this page, you will find all the material related to art and design, teaching materials, assessment materials to help you deliver that qualification. The most important thing being on there will be the specification. The other 3 tabs at the top, gain approval, if you wanted to add and deliver any other NCFE qualifications. The delivery and learner support tab contains documents to help you deliver the qualification, such as some of the documents there are things like the external assessment timetable, different support events and webinars, forms if you're appealing any decisions, if any of your learners need access arrangements, extra time scribes, things like that. And the final tab, in the policies and documents tab, that contains the regulations and policies that need to be followed and other support documents that you may find useful. So let's focus for now on the actual external assessment, and we'll go through the regulations and their importance and why everyone should really be familiar with them. So again, on qualhub.co.uk, you will have to go to the policies and documents tab. In there, you will find the key documents, including the assessment regulations. The regulations in that section are for the internal assessments as well as the external assessment. Let's focus on the external assessment. Now, we are a member of the JCQ, the Joint Council for Qualifications, but it does take some time for the regulations to be fully integrated. So until then, we have our own documents which are required. For the external exam, there's a document called the Regulation for the Conduct of External Assessment. Now, this is a set of generic instructions regarding preparing for the external assessment, administering it as well, and what to do after the assessment has been completed. So it includes information like the safe and secure storage of the assessment papers, the start and end times of assessments, which can be changed by 30 minutes, and the steps needed if you need a larger time change. The invigilation of the exams, what the invigilators should do, how to position the desks, and so on, that sort of thing. Now, if there are any compliance issues that arise during the external assessment process, then NCFE need to be informed immediately. So the more people that are familiar with these regulations, that's going to reduce the chances of any compliance issues actually occurring. The next document is the Qualification Specific Instructions for Delivery, or QSID for short. Now, this gives specific information for the different qualifications. For example, if the assessment needs to be invigilated or just supervised, if the use of the internet is permitted, and so on. For all subject areas in the Level 1/2 Technical Award Cert, the same rules apply. And those rules are: the exam papers will be delivered and securely returned to us. No online option is available. The learners don't need internet or computer access to complete the exam. The exam lasts an hour and a half and is on a set day and time. And learners need a black or blue pen and a ruler. with pencils and calculators being optional. There are some qualifications where it would be very useful, such as engineering, to actually have a calculator too, though. Now, as the exam is on a set date and time, it's very important to know where the exam timetable is. And when we click on the Delivery and Learner Support tab, in there, you'll find the exam table, and that includes cutoff dates for registering learners and the date for when the results are available. And the other useful section is the forms bit, and we will come on to that shortly. But first, let's have a look at the exam timetable. Now, I have looked at this current academic year, 2020-2021, and in here, for the different subject areas, the first thing you see is the cutoff date. Now, this is the date by which you need to have your learners registered. So if you register your learners after this date, then you can be charged late fees. So do ensure you meet this deadline to avoid this. We don't want any centres having to pay late fees. So do ensure you meet that deadline. And that deadline is usually 2 weeks prior to the actual assessment. Then there is an assessment date and time. And as I mentioned, you can change the start date by 30 minutes. So do check the regulations for the conduct of external assessment if you need to change it by any more than 30 minutes. And then finally, we have the results release date, so when the learners actually get their results. The form section is quite an important section, and I'm just going to highlight some of the key forms that's available there. Now, as I have mentioned earlier, if the external assessment regulations aren't followed, then we need to be informed, and that can be done via the malpractice or maladministration forms. The sooner you do this, regardless of how minor you perceive the issue to be, the more chance we have of getting help, and to avoid a more significant issue further down the line. In terms of cutoff dates, if you do happen to miss them, then you'll need to complete the late entry forms. If any of your learners need extra time or a scribe, things like that, then the access arrangement and reasonable adjustment form needs to be submitted to us. The request for special consideration is after the assessment has been taken, and it's for when some adverse circumstances could have impacted on the learner's ability to demonstrate their usual level of attainment, for example, an illness or bereavement that may have occurred. And the request for the assessment variation is when you want to vary that assessment from the published assessment date or the published assessment time beyond the 30 minutes that I've mentioned, or change or extend the assessment site from your current approved location. So if this assessment was going to be done at a different location, for example. Let's focus in now. So that's the key regulations and key forms. So let's move on to the actual assessment papers themselves and the grading of the exam. So on the qualification subject specific page, so for art and design engineering, on those specific subject pages, you'll find material related to the assessment for your subject area. And we're going to have a closer look at some of the material that is actually available there for you. So all the material I'm going to show you is available free of charge, but some of these materials may not be available for every subject area. So do check your subject specific page. I'll try and highlight which areas these things are included in. So one of the things we have available are end of topic tests, and these are available in the health and fitness qualification, and they contain multiple choice questions and answers. And this is probably going to be most useful for the first assessment objective of recalling knowledge, the recall and demonstrate knowledge and understanding assessment objective, AO1, because that makes up for all qualifications except one, it makes up between 40 to 45% of the exam marks. As I said, there is one where there's an exception, that's art and design. With art and design, applying knowledge, AO2 is more heavily weighted. But for the other subject areas, 40 to 45% are for AO1, recalling and demonstrating knowledge and understanding. For every qualification, you're going to find past or sample exam papers. So these are for the external exam, and the external exam can be sat in November and March each year. There is also the mark scheme to go along with those papers, and the mark scheme will also say which assessment objectives are being addressed by that question, if it's AO1, AO2, AO3, or a combination of them. There's also the Chief Examiner's Report, which provides an insight into how nationally learners performed on the different questions. Which questions had strong answers, which ones were answered incorrectly, what were the common errors, so that can help to inform any future teaching. Inside the Chief Examiner's Report is also where you'll find the grade boundaries. There are some exam prep exercises for different questions, but mostly they are for the extended response questions, so the long 9-mark questions, for example. So we do have some prep exercises for them. Now, these are available for health and fitness, business and enterprise, and engineering. So in this example, it's a 9-mark question about muscle fibers, and on there is some tips about how to address it is given, and there are different activities there as well that the learners can work through, such as mind mapping, organizing their knowledge into tables, and so on. So you can use these exam prep, you can use these for exam prep, you can use them for homework, or even determining which methods your class or learners might find the most beneficial for answering these questions. And for some of the qualifications as well, we do have model answers, which can be used to help improve learners' achievement. As newly in 2013's research has shown, as a Sadler in 2002, Hooks in 2007, Haw in 2017. So there's lots of research that seems to show that model answers can help improve that learner achievement. For the internally assessed synoptic project, we do have past and sample projects which can be used as practice for learners prior to the live one that does get released in December, and that is to be done in their terminal year, in their final year of study. To help with the marking of the synoptic project, I know I am speaking about the internal assessment here, but to help with the marking of that, we do have sample learner portfolios. The only exception with this is for performance skills. Now, we were going to use the 2020 work submitted to help produce some sample materials, but unfortunately, COVID-19 coronavirus prevented the submission of performance skills portfolio. So as such, we don't actually have any at the minute. But what the exemplar work for the other subject areas does contain, it contains the learner's work and comments from an external quality assurer justifying the marking decision. Now, I know that I'm speaking about the internal assessment when talking about the synoptic project, but these can actually be used to help for the external assessment as well, as the synoptic project covers the same assessment objectives that are on the exam. And we're going to have a look at those assessment objectives as well. So some of the sample answers that are on there, you could use to help prepare your learners for similar questions that could come up in the external assessment as well. So let's have a look at those assessment objectives. For all the level 1/2 technical awards, there are the 5 assessment objectives that are covered. In the external assessment, it is the first 3. The first 3 about demonstrating knowledge and understanding is what the external assessment does focus on. So recalling knowledge and understanding, applying knowledge and understanding, and applying and evaluating knowledge and understanding. They are the ones that will be in the external assessment. So that unit 1, the external assessment, it has got 48 guided learning hours. And that's important to consider if you're delivering it to year 10 or if you're delivering it to year 11 for the first time. The exam itself is an hour and a half and is worth a total of 80 marks. And the opportunities to sit this exam are available in November and March each year. So if you're beginning with year 10, it might be best to have the exam in March of year 10 or November of year 11. And the reason I'm suggesting that is because there is one resit opportunity allowed. So if you're beginning with year 11, then the option would be to have an exam in November and then a resit available in March for them. But this all would depend on how much contact time you have with the class. Obviously, you get a bit more flexibility if you're doing it over 2 years, starting with year 10 students. And just a reminder again, on that exam timetable, it's going to tell you that cutoff date for registering your learners for the exam. And that, as I said, that's usually 2 weeks before the exam. And we want to make sure you pay close attention to that deadline. We don't want you to have to pay any late fees. And whichever exam they actually perform better in, that's the grade that counts towards their final grade. Now, as an approximation, this is the breakdown of marks in the exam for each of those assessment objectives. So for most subject areas, 40 to 45% of the marks are for recalling and showing that knowledge and understanding, whereas some of the higher order thinking of analysis and evaluation will account for around 20% of the marks. As I'd mentioned earlier, the exception is art and design, where applying knowledge, as you can see there, 41%, that counts for a higher percentage applying knowledge in art and design. The final grade in the external assessment is determined by converting the mark into a maximum UMS of 160. So UMS, most of you may be familiar, the Uniform Mark Scale, which is the method used to standardize the marking of papers across exam windows. So the maximum UMS is 160. So a minimum of 24 UMS is needed to get a level 1 pass in the exam. So these UMS grade boundaries will never change. It's always going to be 24 UMS for a level 1 pass, 47 for a level 1 merit, and so on. But what does change each year is how many raw marks equates to those UMS marks. So that would change each year though. But if we have a look at the grade boundaries for the most recent assessment, in this case, the one in March 2020, in most cases, the recall of knowledge, assessment objective 1, would have been enough to secure learners a level 2 pass. So as you can see for business and enterprise, the only exception again, art and design, as AO2, applying knowledge is more heavily weighted with art and design, but business and enterprise 43%, engineering 50%, health and fitness 40%, and performance skills about 49%. So to get a level 2 pass, that's how much they had to achieve. So in many cases, just that AO1, assessment objective 1, the recalling knowledge, could have actually secured some learners a level 2 pass. The grade boundaries for any of these exams are found within the Chief Examiner's Report. So let's dive in then to, there we go, that's better. So as I was saying, let's dive straight in to the type of questions and style of questions that are available that come up on the external assessment. So as mentioned earlier, it does cover the first 3 assessment objectives, and whenever possible, we do set the exam questions in context with real-world case studies. And on the exam, there's 3 main types on the external assessment. We have these 3 main types of questions that appear. Multiple choice questions, which help to cover AO1. This example here is one from performance skills. So as well as multiple choice, we do have short answer questions. This example here from business and enterprise explain the meaning of batch production. So short answer ones. And also extended response questions. Could be worth 6 marks or more, such as this art and design question that's on artwork that represents economic circumstances, worth 12 marks. So extended response questions as well. So multiple choice, short answer questions, and extended response questions. The look of the exam paper is going to contain how many marks the question is worth, in this case 4 marks, and the questions, we try and write them all in plain English as much as possible to ensure that they are accessible to the learners. With some of the questions, again, wherever possible, we try and provide some scaffolding, such as this health and fitness one. Now, it can't be done for every question, as the exam has to be able to discriminate between level 1 and level 2 learners, but for some of the questions, we do have this scaffolding in place to make sure that no aspect of the question is missed. Bolding as well, putting certain aspects in bold, is used to highlight important aspects, such as how many points are required. Do they just need to mention one key point or 2 key points, or any other sort of important bits that could easily be missed, like the performance skills questions, which is asking for 2 skills and other than singing. So that other than aspect being in bold to make sure that isn't missed. And for engineering, the equation sheet is included with the assessment paper. So let's have a look at the extended response questions and how the marking of this is laid out. So the marking is laid out in bandings or levels. And in each banding, the learners will need to demonstrate all 3 of the assessment objectives to be successful. So a band 1 or a level 1 answer needs assessment objective 1, 2, and 3 to be shown. And a band 2 would also need an assessment objective 1, 2, and 3 shown, but much more detailed. And band 3, the highest level, so the assessment objectives, all 3 of them would have to be very strongly demonstrated. So I'll just show you a generic example. So if this was for the mark scheme for a 9-mark question, then level 1 answer or band 1 answer would be worth 1 to 3 marks. Band 2 or level 2, 4 to 6 marks. And 3 would be worth 7 to 9 marks. So in band 1, for AO1, the range of knowledge and terms is quite limited, whereas the highest level of band 3, they've demonstrated wide range and accurately used information, and details is in there for a band 3. And likewise for AO2, the application is inappropriate or has errors in it if it's a band 1 answer, but a band 3 answer, it's very relevant. They've linked it right to the context of the question. In assessment objective 3, in a band 1 or a level 1 answer, there is poor or an ineffective analysis and evaluation, and any conclusions that have been made aren't very clear. But a band 3 answer is has got a highly effective analysis and evaluation. Any of the conclusions that they've made have been justified. So let's look at this with an art and design example. So it has to do with contextual factors that led to the pop art movement. And in this case, this question is worth 15 marks. So the banding for this mark scheme, we have here a level 1 answer being a maximum of 5 marks, level 2, 6 to 10, and a level 3 answer, 11 to 15. And again, we have some generic statements there on the mark scheme, which can be difficult just if you're trying to judge it purely by the generic statements. So we do include some more specific information on the mark scheme to give you an idea of the type of content and the type of application that we should be seeing in their answer. So some examples there of the content that could be in their answer. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of those extended response questions. So I'm going to show you just a few strategies that you might already be using, ones that could help to boost your learners' performance in the external assessment. So one technique that I myself used was for recalling of AO1 type questions, so the recall knowledge. And the technique I would do would be to give my learners a set of questions for homework, let's say 10 questions, for example. And they're all quick, short answer recall questions. And I would actually let them know in the lesson that we're going to have a starter quiz next lesson on 5 of those questions. So they're given 10 questions, for example, and 5 I was going to test them on in the following lesson. Then they come in to start the next lesson, just display the questions on the board, and the learners would have to answer them in their books. And then we would either peer or self-assess them. So letting them know exactly what question is going to be on their exam, on their little starter test the next lesson. They have to go home, find the answers, and then test them on just 5 of them. So that was one of the little quick techniques just to make sure that the short answer, quick recall questions were being addressed. Because as I've mentioned earlier, in many exam areas, in many subject areas, that could have secured the learners a level 2 pass. Now, during the course of lockdown and COVID-19 and home learning, many of you may have become more familiar with Google Docs and Google Forms, Google Classroom, and so on. So I'm going to go through one way of using it to create quizzes or even homeworks using Google Forms. So when you start a new form, you can choose what type it is, whether it's multiple choice, checkbox, drop-down menu, and more. So as we see there, next to the untitled question, we can choose the option right there. And if you click on the settings icon, that gear icon right there, you can choose to make it a quiz, whether they see the result immediately or later, whether they can see the correct answer, and so on. So one option of using this could be for health and fitness. So for health and fitness, you can use some of the end of topic quizzes that we have available on your subject page and copy it into the form. And then you can select the answer, and you're able to actually add, when you select the answer, you can add answer feedback. And this can allow you to add feedback for any incorrect answers. That could include maybe directions to websites where they can find information to help them complete it, as well as adding feedback for correct answers. So another useful tool for insert learning, and this is a Chrome extension, and again can be used with Google Classroom too, that can allow you to insert content onto any web page and share that with your learners. So some of the things you can do with insert learning is you can highlight text on a web page, add questions, discussion boxes, post-it notes, and so much more. So let's say for art and design, you can add a box underneath certain pictures for discussion about color, form, space, and texture within a picture. So in the example I've done here, I've gone onto the National Gallery and put a little discussion box under here to discuss the 7 aspects of visual language in the painting above. I would then be able to share that with my learners so that when they click on that page, they will actually have that discussion box there and that they would be able to type into. Because AO2, the applying knowledge, is more heavily weighted in the art exam, this might be one way to get the learners to practice that particular objective. So teaching your learner, another key strategy, teaching your learner to carefully analyze and being able to break down an exam question is often a vital skill. So I usually have my learners underline, circle, or highlight the context or the scenario of the question to ensure that they are referring to it. So here we have oil and gas chemical engineering. So highlighting that aspect. Then also get them to highlight the key ask of the question. So what is the key ask that they need to address? So what content or knowledge do they need to demonstrate in this question? So we have safety procedures in this case. What are the command words to ensure they are fully addressing the questions? So they have to discuss the importance, analyze impacts, and so on in this case. And then finally, you can have your learners write some key notes around the question to remind them what it is they need to include before fully organizing their thoughts onto the actual question. Now, providing exemplars in a learning environment, and the case for and there's actually a piece of educational research, the case for and against. That is a piece of educational research carried out by David Newland. And some of the things that he found out was that learners actually wanted exemplar material, that they did actually find them useful. And if learners do a piece of work, they often have to wait for it to be marked and feedback given. Whereas with exemplars, they find that they actually help them to identify their own weaknesses by looking at these example works, that they do actually lead to an improvement in learner performance, and that examples can make the criteria and standards very transparent, and it makes it more tangible to the learners as it's actually set in context as well. Now, there are drawbacks as well. They could lead to a lack of creativity or plagiarism from the learners, and they can be time consuming to produce for the teachers. As for the time issue, do look on your subject page on qualhub, as we do have model answers for some qualifications, or using the synoptic project, those exemplar ones. What you could be able to do is take snapshots, little snippets or print screens of some of those bits and just edit out or crop out any EQA comments that are on there. So they have exemplar answers that way. So let's look at some way you could use exemplars in your teaching. So if we looked at a common classroom approach, we could say that it is 2 steps. The teacher delivers the content to the learners, explains the content, shows them what to do, and then the learners are given some of their own questions or problems to have a try of. So instead of going straight from knowledge to application, we could throw in an additional step in there, comprehension. So this is to let's make sure the learners do understand the content. And while you probably will do this through questioning the class, another method can be through peer explaining. So this is where the learners have to explain what was taught to each other, and model answers can actually help with that. So one way of doing this would be the first step, teaching and demonstrating the content as you normally would. Then you could pair up learners and pair them however you see fit, similar ability or opposite ability, whether those who are really strong and push themselves really hard, so fixed mindsets or growth mindsets, those who really want to try hard, those who are sort of a bit reluctant and don't feel like they understand it, boy, girl, however you want, but pair up the learners. You'll then have 2 sets of model answers. So each student in the pair would get a different set. So they're similar questions. Learner 1 would get model answer 1, learner 2 gets model answer 2. So different model answers, but on the similar style of question, same type of content. Learners would then have to study their own model answer, however long that takes. Let's say just 5 minutes for now, just for the sake of argument. Then the learners explain their model answers to each other and justify why the answer is correct. Or you could also produce model answers that contain errors or missing information, and the learners had to explain what else would be needed to make it a full and complete answer. Now, you can give the learners their own problem or question to work on. That's one way of incorporating that. And one final thing, in terms of teaching strategies, using performers or rubrics to help with peer or self-assessment of some extended writing questions, producing some checklists that the learners can use. Now, as the same generic statements are present on the mark scheme for some of the different assessment objectives, you can make them a bit more user-friendly, but as the long written ones, it's the same sort of thing, using a wide range of knowledge, accurate and detailed, key terms, answers linked to the context, conclusions drawn, and those judgments are there to support their conclusions. In the extended written questions, they're the key things that would come up. So you could make a little checklist that could be used quite easily, and you can include sections after each statement if you wanted for things like comments to be included, where if it was being done as peer assessment, for example, they might take if they think they've got a band 1, a poor, good, or strong answer, or band 1, 2, 3 answer, and comments underneath. You should have really used more terminology. You never mentioned this. You didn't mention about the context. So you could add comments on these sorts of things as well, and make them more learner-friendly speech as well. So that can help prepare them for those extended writing questions. So the final thing we're going to have a look at is some of the resources that we do have available for you to use. Now, as I've mentioned, qualhub is definitely your primary go-to, and we're going to have a look at a subject-specific page, because that is one of the key things that you need. So if you start typing in your subject area, or just level 1/2, or the qualification code if you know it. Just put that in there and you'll be able to get to your subject page. So here in this example, we have got art and design. And if we scroll down to the page, we will be able to see we do have a teaching materials tab on this website. So support materials, assessment materials, and so on, those other tabs. Just going to focus on the teaching materials tab that you have there to help you deliver this qualification. So the resources that are available in there for you to use and download free of charge is we do have schemes of work. These outline entire complete units. We have got these based on 1-hour lessons or sessions, and they do provide a summary of the learning outcomes, learning activities that can be done, resources, assessment opportunities for each session as well. We have got complete PowerPoint presentations, which cover the teaching content from the specification, and they do include teaching activities that you could use with your learners. There are also individual lesson plans for each presentation too, and they have suggested timings, lesson aims, learning outcomes, and suggested assessment activities that you could do as well. And finally, there is a workbook and individual worksheets to accompany those lessons as well. Or you could use them as homework or flipped learning opportunities, whatever you decide. And as with all of these resources, it's best to use them and adjust them to how you see fit. Now, these materials are available free of charge, but you will need a portal login in order to access them. And it's usually your exams officer that's able to help out and provide you with a portal login. Now, aside from the skills that learners gain from the V-certs, we also have developed a suite of resources to support the wider curriculum and skills learners will need. So these include 32 sessions, which each last 2 hours, and they cover personal, social, health, and economic education, study skills, employability, and career skills. And these packs as well are found within the teaching materials section on qualhub. Skills Forward, another resource available, is part of the NCFE group, and they are one of the UK's leading e-learning software and assessment solutions for functional skills, for GCSEs, apprenticeships, and employability skills. So the diagnostic tools in there can give you a good indication of your learner's current level. In terms of V-certs, the most useful part of Skills Forward was probably going to be Skills Portfolio. With Skills Portfolio, if we're thinking about the synoptic project, for example, it does allow learners to submit evidence and keep records of their work, which will allow centres as well to easily manage, monitor, and assess their learners remotely, especially with the current environment we are in of coronavirus. A system such as this can be quite useful. So the assessor as well is able to upload evidence for the learners too. For example, if there's witness statements for internal assessments or video evidence, things like that. So it can also allow for easy management of the quality assurance process, and it does comply with Ofsted and the Education and Skills Funding Agency requirements. One of the third-party sites or third-party resources I'm going to show you here is iAchieve, which does have some NCFE endorsed programs on there. So iAchieve is an online learning platform which has content specifically designed for health and fitness, technical award, and the business and enterprise technical award. It does also have content for engineering, which was based on the previous NCFE engineering qualification. So quite a lot will still be relevant in that one as well. There is other areas that are supported on there, such as food and cookery and childcare, to name a few. So this right here is the main dashboard of iAchieve. Here I can see the different qualification areas. And as this webinar is about the level 1/2 V-cert, let's have a closer look at one of these areas. Let's go for business and enterprise. You can see the content is broken up into 2 units. Unit 1 is the content for the external exam, and Unit 2 would be additional content for the synoptic project. The units are broken into different sessions that the learners can access, just like discrete lessons, covering sections of the specification. So here's what that would look like. The individual sessions contain all the information, so all the information that learners need to know from the specification, as the sessions have been directly linked and developed from the specification. So within the sessions, there are different activities the learners can do to enhance or test their understanding. And as a teacher, you will be able to monitor the learner's progress throughout the sessions. And for the learners themselves, it does allow them to take greater control of their learning. If we go back to the qualification section, on the right side, we can see that there are some additional documents on the right-hand side there. And some of these documents that can be downloaded are things such as quizzes, past papers, synoptic projects, and so on. So iAchieve resources can be used not only for a learner-led approach, but it can also be used to support blended learning and even a teacher-led approach, which is how a lot of schools do actually use them. So for more information, do visit iachieve.org.uk and they'll be able to provide you with more information. And as I mentioned before, especially in the current environment of COVID-19, it is useful to have some form of online learning available to your learners. So one final area I'm going to mention, a third-party resource, is called GCSE Pod. So GCSE Pod is a series of short videos or pods that summarize the key content of many different qualifications. So they have content for 27 GCSE and IGCSE qualifications, but they do specifically have the NCFE endorsed level 1/2 technical award in health and fitness. However, there is potentially some overlap with other qualifications. For example, business studies is on GCSE Pod, which will probably have similar content to the level 1/2 technical award in business and enterprise. So let's take a closer look at the health and fitness content. And here we can see each subject is broken down into 4 sections. And this is for the first 4 learning objectives. So they have 4 for both Unit 1 and Unit 2 in health and fitness. Now you might remember there are 5 assessment objectives, AO5, but the 5th learning objective is about the learners being able to manage and evaluate their synoptic project. So that's why there isn't an AO5 on there for that. Then each section or learning objective can be broken down into topics. So under the skeletal system, we can see this icon here. And that indicates that there are ready-made assignments available for this topic in addition to the pods. You can see that we have accredited these pods, which means that the content does match to the specification. And you can create your own playlist from these pods and assign them to your learners, or you can create assignments which can include both pods and assessments. And these can be allocated to an individual, just a class, or an entire year group in seconds. So instead of creating your own assignments, you can actually select from a range of ready-made assignments, and this can be quite a time saver. The assignments can be edited. You can add your own questions, and the assignments are printable as well in case any learners don't have access to devices that they could access this on. And GCSE Pod can integrate as well with most management information systems, class charts, for example, which means assignments can be allocated to learners very quickly and in seconds. And reporting is live, and learners can complete assignments in the classroom if needed, and all multiple choice questions that they have on there are self-marking. And you can mark and comment on some of the free text questions or leave feedback for the learners as well. And GCSE Pod will also create a boost playlist for learners. So that pulls together pods covering the questions that learners got wrong to help reinforce their learning. So you can go to gcsepod.com for more information regarding that. So thank you for your time today, and I do hope you found this useful and you have a better understanding of the external assessment and feel much more prepared for it. If you do need to contact me, my email address is davidkiernan@ncfe.org.uk, or if I'm not available, our general email address is curriculum@ncfe.org.uk. So I'm just going to leave the different references and sources that I mentioned available there on the screen, the useful websites, and do please get in touch if you have any questions. Thank you for your time.